When you were 18, what did you want from life? A cool car? Fame? A corner office? Now think about what you want today. Is it the same thing? It's not. And here's what's terrifying. The financial decisions you made at 18 are still affecting you. The career you chose, the degree you picked, the money habits you built, all based on a version of you who no longer exists. This is chapter 14 of The Psychology of Money You'll Change. Morgan introduces a concept from psychology called the end of history illusion. It was identified by Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert, and it works like this. When we look back at our past, we always see how much we've grown. For example, a 30-year-old looks back at when they were 20 and thinks, I was so different back then. I cared about different things and didn't know what I wanted. But here's the trick our minds play on us. The same 30-year-old thinks they are done changing. They believe the person they are right now is exactly who they will be forever. At 30, you admit you knew nothing at 20. But you don't realize that when you turn 40, you will probably feel the exact same way about being 30. And this creates a massive financial problem. Because we make long-term financial decisions like careers, mortgages, investment strategies, retirement plans, they are based on the desires and goals of our current self, a self that will be a completely different person by the time those decisions fully play out. You pick a career at 20 based on what excites you at 20, but you'll be doing that career at 35, 45, 55 when you're a fundamentally different person with different energy and different definitions of happiness. You commit to a 30-year mortgage at 28 because you love the house, the neighborhood, the city, but at 38, you might want something completely different, like a different city, a different lifestyle. The person who made the plan is never the person who lives with the plan, and that is the trap. At 20, you choose a job because it sounds exciting, but you will still be working that job at 40 or 50, even though you will be a completely different person by then. It is the same with a house. You might buy a home at 28 because you love the city, but at 38, you might want a totally different life. The you who makes the plan is not the same you who has to live with it later. That is the trap. Let's look at our first story, the lawyer who wanted to be a baker. Imagine a young woman named Sarah. She grows up in a family that cares a lot about being successful and having a steady job. Sarah is smart and hardworking. At 22, she decides to become a lawyer. It seems like a great idea at the time. Being a lawyer is a respected job that pays a lot of money. Her parents are proud of her, and her friends are impressed. She studies very hard, finishes at the top of her class, and gets a job at a famous law firm. By age 28, Sarah earns $200,000 a year. She buys a beautiful apartment and a nice car. Her whole life is built around this high salary. But by 33, things change. She starts to hate her job and finds the work boring. She realizes she doesn't care about law anymore. Instead, she dreams of opening a bakery because she loves baking on the weekends. The problem is, she cannot leave. She needs that large salary to pay for her expensive home and her lifestyle. Everyone knows her as a successful lawyer, and she feels she has to keep that image. She is stuck. The 22-year-old Sarah made a smart choice for who she was then, but the 33-year-old Sarah is a different person. She is trapped by the choices of someone who doesn't exist anymore. This happens to millions of people. It's not because they made bad choices, but because they made permanent plans based on how they felt a long time ago. Let's look at our second story, the sunk cost of identity. This is the part that hurts the most. Once you have built a life around being a certain person, like a lawyer, a doctor, or a boss, changing your life becomes very expensive. It isn't just about money. It's about your feelings too. Psychologists call this the sunk cost fallacy. It means you have already spent 10 years and thousands of dollars on your career. You feel like walking away would be a total waste of all that time and money. So you stay in your job even if it makes you miserable. The mistake isn't that your first choice was bad. The mistake is refusing to change your mind even after you have changed. Don't ask, was this a good choice when I was 20? Instead, ask, is this still a good choice for who I am today? Let me show you this happening on a massive scale right now, in a way that's reshaping the global economy. The FIRE movement's reckoning what happens when you retire at 35 and realize you've changed. In the last 10 years, a movement called FIRE became very popular. FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. It started in the US and then spread to places like Australia, the UK, Europe, and Asia. The idea was simple and seductive. Instead of spending, save 50%, 60%, even 70% of your income. Invest in index funds and retire in your 30s or 40s and never work again. This was seen as total freedom. Thousands of people, mostly young professionals in tech or finance, have tried this. To save money, they lived very simply. They stayed in tiny apartments, drove old cars, and ate cheap meals like rice and beans. They tracked every cent they spent. Eventually, many of them reached their goal, usually between $1 million and $2 million, and quit their jobs for good. They did it. They won the game. And then something unexpected happened. They changed. Around 2022 and continuing through 2024, many people who successfully retired early started sharing their stories online. They had reached their goals, but they were unhappy. One famous FIRE blogger retired at age 34 with $2.3 million. He wrote about the dark side of his new life. He felt lonely and anxious. His friends were all at work, and he had nothing to do all day. He had worked so hard to become the guy who retires early that he didn't know who he was once he actually did it. Another FIRE achiever, a software engineer in the Netherlands, retired at 38. However, she went back to work only 2 years later. She didn't need the money. She just realized she was a different person than she was at 28. At 28, she was tired and just wanted to be free. But at 38, she wanted to build things and talk to coworkers. The freedom she spent 10 years working for actually felt like a big, empty hole in her life. In 2023, a survey by a blog called The Pioneers found that almost half of the people who reached their goal of retiring early felt differently than when they started. Their goals and values had significantly changed. Many of them wished they hadn't been so extreme with their saving and had enjoyed life more along the way. This leads to a very sad realization. Many of these people made irreversible sacrifices for retiring early. They skipped vacations for a decade. They chose not to have children because kids cost too much money. They lived in cities they hated just because the cost of living was lower. They had said no to experiences, relationships, and opportunities. They did all of this to reach a specific amount of money, but in the end, they found out that having that money didn't actually make them happy. The 28-year-old who made the plan was not the same person as the 38-year-old who finished it. The 38-year-old ended up living a life designed for someone who doesn't exist anymore. To be clear, having enough money to be independent is a great goal. The problem isn't the goal itself. The problem is making a strict all-or-nothing plan and assuming you will want the same things in 10 years that you want today. The truth is, you won't want the same things. You will change. You always do. I'm going to be very honest with you. I am not the same person I was 5 years ago. And back then, I was different from the person I was 5 years before that. 5 years ago, I wanted a high-ranking job. I wanted a fancy title, a big salary, and for people to be impressed by me. Every choice I made, like where I lived and what I studied, was to reach that goal. Today, I don't care about fancy job titles at all. Now, I want the freedom to be creative, time with the people I love, and work that feels important to me. And here's the scary part. If I had locked myself into a 30-year plan based on what I wanted 5 years ago, like a huge house, mortgage, or a career I couldn't quit, then I would be trapped right now. I would be living a life built for someone I am no longer. Thankfully, I didn't. Not because I was smart, mostly because I was lucky enough to read this book at the right time. I kept my bills low and saved my money. I kept my options open. When I eventually changed, I had the freedom to change my life too. The biggest financial risk isn't a stock market crash. The biggest risk is building a life so stiff that you can't change when you change. And you will change. I promise. There are 3 takeaways from this chapter. First, try to make choices that you can change later. Before you make a big move like buying a house, picking a career, or moving to a new city, ask yourself, how hard would it be to cancel this if I change my mind in 5 years? Always pick the option that is easier to undo. For example, renting before buying. Try freelance work before joining a company forever. Live in a city for a year before moving there permanently. Being able to change your mind is a strength, not a weakness. Second, check in with your future self every year. Once a year, maybe on your birthday or New Year's, sit down and ask yourself, do I still want the same things I wanted last year? Is the way I spend my money still matching what I care about today? Am I doing these things because I want to, or just because I've always done them? Doing this once a year will stop you from living a life that was meant for the old you. Third, focus on having fewer regrets, not just making the most money. When you have to make a big financial choice, don't just ask, which way makes me the richest? Instead, ask yourself, if I become a completely different person in 10 years, which choice will I regret the least? Usually, the best choice is the one that gives you flexibility, like less commitment, more options, more room to pivot. That's chapter 14, You'll Change. The chapter that doesn't tell you how to invest better or save more. It tells you something far more important. Be gentle with your future self, because that person will have different dreams, different priorities, and different definitions of happiness. And the greatest gift you can give them is the flexibility to pursue whatever those turn out to be. In the next video, we cover Chapter 15, Nothing's Free. Morgan reveals that every good investment has a price, and it's not the price you think. It's volatility, uncertainty, doubt, and fear. And the people who refuse to pay that price, they end up paying an even bigger one. Like this video if it made you think about who you'll be in 10 years. Subscribe if you're here for the long run. We're in the final stretch of this incredible book. And tell me in the comments, what's one thing you wanted 5 years ago that you don't want anymore? I bet the answers will prove Morgan's point perfectly. See you in the next one.